The thought of becoming a worldwide superstar alongside your siblings might sound like a dream, or it might be your idea of a nightmare. But Joe, Nick, and Kevin Jonas seem to have handled it pretty well. It's been years since the brothers became teen idols, and a lot has changed. They're all grown up and even have children of their own now. How have they handled the pressures of fame and fatherhood, you ask? The Jonas Brothers have opened up about how they make it all work, the lines they refuse to cross, and the one unspoken rule that helps them as parents. Past experiences. Yes, while it still might be hard to wrap your head around at times, all three Jonas siblings are fathers now. They've come a long way since dropping their debut album back in 2006 as youngsters. Could Nick, Kevin, and Joe's unique upbringing influence the way they raise each of their children today? After all, life as a kid in the Jonas household must have been pretty different to what a lot of us experienced at home. Sons of a pastor. Growing up in Wyckoff, New Jersey, Nick, Kevin, Joe, and their younger brother Frankie were raised in a very religious household. Given that their dad, Kevin Jonas Sr., was a pastor at the local church, that shouldn't be too surprising. This might catch you off guard, though due to his father's position, Joe already felt like he was in the spotlight before the band had even been formed. And with that feeling came a sense of responsibility. He went into more detail during a chat with New York Magazine. Role model. Speaking in December 2013, Joe said, "To some extent, I was used to growing up in public. I was a pastor's kid, so eyes were always on me, even then. I sat in the first pew of the church, and I had to wear a suit every Sunday because my parents wanted me to be this role model that I didn't always want to be. I preferred going to punk rock shows in small venues in New Jersey, wearing my jean jacket and all my band pins. Certain obligations. That's how I fell in love with music, how I became obsessed with it," Joe continued. "But I had certain obligations at that age. If I ever didn't want to go to church on Sunday, or when I was trying to figure out what religion I wanted to be, or trying to understand spirituality, I would always have to deal with knowing that people were looking up to me. That's a tricky spot to find yourself in, especially when you're just a kid." Embracing music. Yet religion didn't completely dominate the Jonas home. Music was a big thing in their family as well. Nick in particular really embraced that when he was a youngster. By all accounts, he'd sing whenever he could, regardless of the location. A pivotal moment in Nick's life came when, as a 6-year-old, he joined his mom, Denise Jonas, at a hair salon. And while she got her locks tended to, he started to belt out tunes without a care in the world. Huge step. Before long, a fellow patron at the salon approached Denise with an intriguing suggestion. Her son was a performer with his own manager, and she noted that Nick might want to have a meeting with him. After giving it some thought, the Jonas matriarch made it happen. She took her boy to see the guy. Thanks to that decision, Nick found himself on Broadway by the time he was just 7 years old. Rising stars. And that's not all. Joe and Kevin were taken to that same meeting as well, leading the manager to recruit them, too. As a result, they were handed some advertising work with the likes of Office Depot, Burger King, and Clorox. The brothers' childhoods had taken a significant turn. They weren't just the sons of a pastor anymore, nor simply role models for the folks at their church. The youngsters were now rising stars. But did that have a knock-on effect at home? "My parents decided to homeschool us." Well, Joe noted a major change that his mom and dad implemented a little while later. He informed New York Magazine, "I went to school until about 7th grade, before my parents decided to homeschool us. I sucked at math. I was pretty good with science, and I was great at music class. Big surprise, music was always in the house. Our dad could play just about anything, and we started picking up instruments ourselves." Intriguing questions. So that brings us back to the question we raised earlier. Is there a chance that the brothers' younger years shaped them as parents? And if so, has that caused issues within their family circle, whether with Denise and Kevin Sr. or their respective wives? But as we mentioned before, regardless of any potential tensions, Nick, Joe, and Kevin have agreed on a rule that stops arguments about parenting dead in their tracks. Love at first sight. We wonder how Kevin Sr. and Denise feel about it. Do they endorse their son's stance? The pair have certainly been on quite the journey since they were introduced at the Christ for the Nations Institute in Dallas, Texas, back in the 1980s. While neither of them could have predicted what the future would hold at that point, one thing was clear. The young students felt the piercing sting of Cupid's arrow as soon as they started talking in the university's registration queue. He could be a wonderful father someday. Looking back on that day, Denise spoke to Good Housekeeping magazine. The Jonas matriarch said, Kevin SR was talking about working at a summer camp with these young kids and all his passion and heart for them. And I thought he could be a wonderful father someday. Around half a year on from that first meeting, Kevin SR popped the question. Denise gladly accepted the couple walked down the aisle in the summer of 1985. The couple had been only 18 when they'd exchanged their vows, a shared passion. And in addition to their love for each other, Denise and Kevin SR also shared a common personal interest: music. After wrapping up their studies at the Christ for the Nations Institute, Denise balanced a job there in the registrar's office in 1990 with being a vocalist. As for her hubby, he composed Christian tunes at the university, on top of teaching songwriting classes too. Plus, they were parents by that stage as well, looking after Joe and Kevin at home. The boys would travel with me. Kevin SR and Denise didn't just spend time with their sons there either. As the dad revealed to People magazine in 2008, we would take Christian singing groups on the road, so when I traveled, the boys would travel with me and Denise. Yep, you could say that was Kevin and Joe's first taste of touring. Those trips spanned months, but they ultimately stopped when the patriarch was given the chance to become a pastor in Wyckoff. Nick was welcomed into the world during that period too. Unquestionable commitment. Now, if you thought Kevin SR might have prioritized his time at the church over his loved ones back then, we've got some news for you. He didn't. In fact, the guy was so committed to his son's growing passion for making music that it ultimately cost him. The biggest issue for them was the fact that he was putting his attention on his family over the church, Joe noted on the Fill in the Blanks podcast in 2019. And it really made this divide happen between us. Hard times. It was an incredibly difficult spell for the Jonas clan. You see, after Kevin SR was relieved of his duties, they had to leave the house provided to them by the church for a much smaller abode. And if that wasn't enough, the community as a whole essentially blacklisted them, too, ending some close friendships. Yet as tough as that was, Joe, Nick, and Kevin used the time to start penning tracks for their 2007 sophomore record, titled Jonas Brothers, the star-making moment. That was the album that changed everything, as its success marked the start of Kevin, Nick, and Joe's monumental rise in the music industry. Would any of this have been possible without their parents' unwavering support? It's hard to say. But one thing can't be denied today: Denise and Kevin SR are just as devoted to their grandkids as they are to their famous sons. The pair love hanging out with the youngsters, even if it might mean abiding by their boys' rule. The Jonas Brothers broods. In total, the brothers are parents to 5 children with their respective spouses. Kevin and his wife, Danielle, share 2 daughters named Valentina Angelina and Alina Rose. The latter was delivered in February 2014, while her younger sister arrived a couple of years later in the fall. And these days, Kevin absolutely loves the fact that his girls can attend the band's gigs now. As he said to People, it's been a blessing having them come out and be a part of it. Self-reflection. As for Joe, he also has 2 daughters with his now ex-partner Sophie Turner. Their first kid, Willa, was born in July 2020. Then, 2 years on from that big moment, their family grew once again. Before becoming a dad of 2, though, the music star had shared a few interesting thoughts while chatting with People in May 20th to 22nd. In his mind, being a parent gave him a chance to do some serious self-reflecting and discover more about himself as a person each day. An amazing part of life. Joe said, "You really don't know what to expect when becoming parents. I think I'm maybe a little less nervous this time, but I'm just as excited. It's such an amazing part of life. It's been amazing to be a dad and to learn every day more about myself and what that's like. We're living in a new city, and it's a very exciting time. I'm very much looking forward to the future on all things." Speaking of which, that brings us on to Nick, a real dream. Following Nick and Priyanka Chopra Jonas' wedding in 2018, he revealed just how eager they had been to become a mom and dad. "I think that's a real dream, and I think I've had to grow up pretty quick," the musician said on the Rewind with Guy Raz podcast. With that, you could look at it 2 ways. You could say that was unfair, or you could say it's given me some real perspective at an early age, and I've seen a lot of life at an early age. Big changes. "I hope to be able to share that with a kid of my own someday," Nick added. In the end, his dream came true in January 20th to 22nd. He and Priyanka became the proud parents of a little girl, whom they named Malti Marie. She was delivered via a surrogate, And it didn't take long for the famous pair to realize that all aspects of their lives would be forever changed by her arrival, especially travel. Nick touched on that in a different interview. Definitely different now. Travel is definitely different now, with the amount of stuff you need to bring for the baby, Nick told Travel Leisure magazine in November 20th to 22nd. It's pretty funny. Family vacations are really special. It's been a pretty amazing experience for us. He certainly would have been able to better relate to Kevin SR. And Denise's past road trips now, when they had young Joe and Kevin in tow, it's a lot of work. But just as it was back then, the juice was worth the squeeze. The unwritten rule. So, now that we're better acquainted with the Jonas Brothers' respective broods, that brings us back to their unwritten family rule. What is it? Well, the subject came up when Nick, Joe, and Kevin appeared on the morning mashup show on SiriusXM in April 20th to 23rd. The host pondered whether Kevin had ever been asked to dole out fatherhood tips to his siblings, seeing as he had been the first to become a dad. And this is what the music superstar had to say in response. Advice about family. Kevin revealed, "We really don't give each other advice. We really don't give each other advice about family. It's kind of like an unspoken rule. We just do our own things. Do it our way, but why is that the case? Is there a particular reason for the brothers' stance?" Nick went into more detail on that front, outlining that none of them wished to invade the other's personal space when it came to parenthood discussions. A really healthy thing. Think about it, Nick explained. The last thing you want to hear from your siblings is how to parent your child. So I think we all sort of understand that and just say, you do your thing, I'm just going to show up and be Uncle Nick and Uncle Joe, whatever. And that's how it goes. But it's a really healthy thing that we never really spoke about. But I think it's the right thing. He then turned his attention to the listeners at home. More details. Jokingly, Nick added, "So to all the siblings listening, this is some advice for you." Kevin went on to deadpan, "We're doing it better, mind you. This wouldn't be the only time that the trio discussed this intriguing topic in April 20th to 23rd. They were invited to appear on the Radio Andy show on SiriusXM that month as well, when the subject came up once again. Apparently, the famous brothers did have a tendency to hand out advice about stuff regardless of if it was needed. Unwanted feedback. Nick noted, "I think there are times we critique each other or we give unwanted feedback on certain things. It's the thing that every single sibling group goes through, which is, you don't want to hear what your sibling thinks you should be doing better. As we became parents, we basically set up a rule that was no feedback, no advice. You go and do your journey, do your thing, and I'm going to do mine, and it's the healthiest way forward." Parenting styles. If it helps keep the peace, then the superstar brothers have done pretty well. Maybe Nick was only half joking when he suggested other siblings should follow their lead. But while they appear to know their role in discussions about fatherhood, what are the Jonas Brothers really like as parents? Do they each have a particular approach at home when caring for their daughters? Let's peel back the curtain here, starting with the youngest of the trio. Much more intense. During a chat with News in May 20th to 22nd, Nick revealed that he'd been affected deeply by becoming a parent. He stated, "The weight of everything is much more intense. I think it's now about trying to be as present as possible and as thoughtful as you can be for your family, but also for other people's journeys. I'm so grateful for Malti and the wonderful perspective of being a parent." Given the state of Malti's health following her birth, that outlook made even more sense. A really testing spell. You see, Malti had been forced to spend more than 100 days inside a neonatal intensive care unit before her parents could take her back home. Understandably, they were extremely relieved when the time came, with Nick describing his daughter as amazing. Overall, though, it had been a testing period for the family, prompting the famous couple to share some insight in a joint Instagram post. It was released on a special day as well, to really hammer home the emotion of it all. "The roller coaster we've been on." The post said, "On this Mother's Day, we can't help but reflect on these last few months and the roller coaster we've been on, which we now know so many people have also experienced. Every family's journey is unique and requires a certain level of faith. And while ours was a challenging few months, what becomes abundantly clear, in retrospect, is how precious and perfect every moment is. It should come as no surprise that Nick and Priyanka treasure each moment with Malti now." Protective dad. As Nick continues to adjust to the intensity of fatherhood, though, Kevin has moved into a new phase with his daughters, one with which many parents will be familiar. On July 20th to 22nd, while taking part in a chat in front of ET's cameras, the musician was posed a question by his younger brother Frankie. Referring to his three siblings, the latter said, "So, you're all girl dads. Which one of you will be the most protective when the girls grow up?" I died a little inside. After giving it some thought, Kevin responded, "I can't really speak for them. I'm sure they're going to be however they're going to be with their daughters, but I can say for myself, I'm going to be protective. But I also know I'm going to have to let them go. It's going to be tough. I was at a birthday party, and Valentina let go of my hand and grabbed the hand of a friend, and I died a little inside." Steadfast support. Kevin surely isn't the only dad to go through that. But in addition to his protective nature, the music star has also previously made it clear that he'll support whatever path his daughters choose to go down. Just as Kevin Sr. did for him and his brothers, he won't stand in their way. At the same time, though, Kevin doesn't want to push them into his professional world if they've got no interest in it. Help her fulfill her dreams. If Elena told me she wanted to be in the music industry or the entertainment business one day, I would help her fulfill her dreams, Kevin informed People. But only if they were her dreams and not mine. I'd tell her the good and the bad, but I would never push her. He's already familiar with one of the industry's most negative aspects, spending time away from the family while going on tour with his brothers, and working around it is tough. It's hard. Speaking in fall 2019 on the Chicks in the Office podcast, Kevin admitted, "It's hard. I fly home as much as I can. Say we have a day off, I get up at 5 and fly home, turn it around the next morning, and I'll be home for 18 hours. There isn't much of a balance pay, but at least you're there. My daughters are very supportive, and they come out as much as they can. There's a rock concert in my bedroom." When he is home, though, Kevin is quick to stress just how fulfilling his life really is thanks to Danielle and their girls. In fact, the couple even penned a kids' picture book that was inspired by them called "There's a Rock Concert in My Bedroom," which came out in March 20th to 22nd. Now, while neither of Kevin's brothers have done anything similar, Joe has also come clean about the enrichment he feels when hanging with his family. He got a real taste of it during the COVID-19 lockdowns. So thankful. Joe told TV Show This Morning, "It's been amazing. It's been forced time at home. I'm always on the go. I'm always moving and traveling and touring. And to be in one place for a solid amount of time and just have my feet on the ground and be with my family, my immediate family, is time I don't think I'll get back. I'm so thankful." And while he isn't interested in hearing his siblings' parenting advice, the musician has received a tip from other parents that he's all too keen to follow. Enjoy every moment. What is it? Simple as Joe said on an episode of the podcast On Purpose with Jay Shetty, literally enjoy every moment, because it moves by so fast, and judging from the way the Jonas Brothers all talk about their respective families, Joe isn't the only one taking that advice. The world-famous clan appear to be as content as can be, so we don't think that unwritten rule is